Hey guys, Abraham here. I just want to remind you guys that we upload all of our courses to Skillshare. Skillshare is this amazing site where you can access a ton of different content to learn, improve, and grow as an artist. We have all of our courses available to watch and learn from right now in Skillshare. You can check the description down here, and Skillshare is offering 1 free month trial to their premium membership. With this membership, you're going to be able to access all of our courses and watch and learn all of the amazing things that we cover with all of the softwares. So, what are you waiting for? Check Skillshare down here below.
Hello and welcome to Next Tooth. My name is Arash and I'll be your instructor in this tutorial. Do you want to learn a software that allows for fast and procedural creation of tree and foliage? So come join me in Introduction to SpeedTree. In this course, we will take an introductory approach into learning different toolset of a SpeedTree. For example, first we learn the UI and then go for all of the different generators so that you know how to create things like bark, leaves, fronds, decoratives, branches, and many more. And in chapter 2, we learn how to create tree and foliage to be used in VFX applications for movies and animation. And first we create a pine tree, and after that we go create a bush, and after that we create a grass patch, so that you learn three fundamental types of foliages. And if you learn these three carefully, you'll be able to pick up a lot of the most common tree types that are created in modern day VFX movies. We are going to create them in a high poly manner. And in chapter 3, we learn how to create foliage and tree for game applications. And we use the SpeedTree for Games modeler to do that. Because we know many of you who use the SpeedTree are going to use that for game applications, such as Unreal Engine 4 and 5 or many more. And also in chapter 3, we learn how to create wind animation for trees and foliage for games. We learn how to create clusters, light maps to be used in Unreal Engine 4 and 5. And in chapter 4, we learn how the different exporting options work. And also we are going to export for VFX and game applications. So, if you're excited to learn a new software and enter a new world of content creation, come join me. My name is Arash from Nextdoot. Looking forward to have a great learning experience together. So, see you there.
So first thing first, there's a project files folder in the download folders that you get, and that includes only the different trees that we create. We have a grass folder, we have a pine, and we have a shrub. And to use this, you want to have the pure ref, the free software to be able to see inside the content. And when you open, you're going to get different references that we use for this course. Of course, as I told you, you need the pure ref, and the pure ref is this one. Search for this word and you will be able to download this pure ref software. It's a great software. It's a great software to let you organize your references into many sections. And of course, we are not sharing these projects that we create because this is really against the laws of a SpeedTree, the company that makes a SpeedTree. We cannot share these models as they are to people. And if you want to use a SpeedTree in your work, it should be in form of a game or a movie or things like that. And the tree itself shouldn't be shared with people. You can only share them using them in a game that they are not accessible. So unfortunately, we cannot share these projects with you because, as I said, is the laws of a SpeedTree that restrict us. So after downloading the reference folders, you can start looking at them and learn from them. And later on, when we start to create these, we will use those references and you can look at them and guess what you want to create. Okay, now let's go for creation. And of course, first we're going to learn about the SpeedTree UI and different things like that. Okay, see you there. Hello, and in this course, we're going to learn a lot about a SpeedTree. And the main target students for this course are the beginners who really want to deep dive into a SpeedTree to learn creating amazing trees. But also intermediate students will find value from this course. And what's nice about this course is that we're going to we're going to cover a speed tree cinema and games edition as well, because we're going to create trees for VFX and games as well, so that maximum numbers of students can benefit from this. So after installing the SpeedTree and running, of course we are running a SpeedTree Cinema version 9, and a lot of this content is going to be applicable to SpeedTree version 8 as well. SpeedTree 9 has added a lot of amazing features, but 90% of what we are going to learn here is going to be usable in previous iterations of SpeedTree. So this is the first screen when you open up a SpeedTree, and you're going to get a scene like this. You're going to be prompted with this window to either create a blank scene or choose from one of these templates, or choose a recent model which you have been working on. So let's create a blank scene, and this is the default scene that you're going to be faced with. And we're going to deep dive in a lot of these menus, but for starters, let's see what the navigations are. You have 3 navigation styles in SpeedTree. You right click here, and in the window navigation you have 3 styles, which is standard, trackball, and traveler. The most basic one is the standard, and that is the default SpeedTree. When you click on a screen, it's going to create a pivot point for you so that you can spin around it, pan, zoom, and rotate, and do all kinds of translation things in a SpeedTree. To pan around your scene, you simply hold down middle mouse click of the mouse and pan the view. And this is going to offset the pivot and the viewport at the same time. To rotate around, you're going to simply hold down left click and drag it to orbit around your scene like this. And to zoom in and out, you can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out, or hold down the left mouse and middle mouse together and drag in and out to zoom into your scene. So that's your choice to see which one you're happy with. And of course, if you come from Maya or 3ds Max, you can go to this edit, preference, and in this tree menu in the control scheme, you can select Autodesk Maya or 3ds Max, which one you're happy with. And this is going to alter the navigations to the software that you're used to work with, if you're using Max or Maya. So this was for the standard, and let's go to window, navigation, and trackball. First, let's add a tree trunk here to see how the trackball is going to function. The controls are the same. You're going to hold down left click to pan, rotate around your scene, but this mode is free mode. You can go for any direction that you want, and of course the directions which are not available in the standard view mode. For panning around your scene, you're going to hold down the middle click, and for zooming in and out, you're going to press and hold down the left mouse click and middle mouse click together and dragging in and out. And the most basic difference between this trackball and a standard is that the rotating doesn't really constrain you to any axis. You're going to be freely rotating around this in 360 degrees sphere-like rotation. But in the standard mode, you're going to have a more reasonable rotating. And the next one is the traveler. You go to window, navigation, and traveler. In this mode, you can walk pretty much like a game and move around the scene like a player. By holding down left click and going in and out, you're going to get closer or move away from the scene. By holding down left and middle click, you're able to look around and change direction, and by pressing middle mouse click and holding and going up and down, you're going to change the height, and by going left and right, you're able to pan around the scene to see what works and what not. So I'm freely able to work with the standard because I like that the most, and of course that's the personal preference. So after understanding the navigation, let's talk about the UI. This window that you see here is called the tree window. This is the 3D viewport where you are able to visualize your model and see the final result in here. Let me open a sample so that we have a little bit more beautiful things to look at. So let's close this one out. We don't want to save it, so no. And let's select something from this. Let's go for this last one. So it's going to take a bit and load the scene for you, and it's going to have a little bit of calculations to calculate the shadow AO and things like that. Of course, we're going to discuss all of these later on. So understanding that this is the viewport and you're going to render and see the final result, just like most of the applications, it's going to be default perspective. And not only that, we're going to be able to divide this up to 4 sections to see the tree in orthographic views as well. So to see them like that, you right click on window layout, you're able to divide this into 1, 4, and 2. So let's click on 4. It's going to divide the viewport into 4 sections. One which is the perspective mode and the most pleasing one looking at the tree from top view, one left to right, and one front and back, just like any other 3D application. And of course, if you get lost in the perspective view, for example, if you're losing your tree, just double click on the perspective space so that it focuses the tree for you. And of course, to customize this window, you can deselect everything and hold down this to open this viewport menu. So for the layout, let's go for other ones as well. This one divides the window to top and bottom. The top one is the perspective and the bottom one is going to render the YZ plane. Of course, this is not the only mode. You can click on this and instead of YZ, go for example for XZ, or for going to top and bottom, you can go for X and Y and double click so that it centers the tree for you. And you can customize that to your needs as well. And the next mode, let's click on this and it's going to divide to right and left, which one you're seeing the perspective. Of course, you can change this one as well. For example, changing this one to XZ and this one to XY, and which one you prefer. And again, if you get lost, just double click on anywhere on the empty space to get back to the tree creation. So for the time being, let's go to just one tree. And of course, if you have multiple layouts, for example, let's select 4. By double clicking with the middle mouse click, you're able to isolate which view that you want. You're going to only have to double click with the middle mouse click to isolate them or go back to the layout view. So let's select the perspective and go to 1 so that this is the default one. And of course, it's going to remember the last layout that you created. For example, if I double click with the middle mouse click, I'm able to go back into here and see the layout as well. So for resizing any of these viewports, you simply hold down this lines in here and maximize any of them that you like. And again, you can go back to the desired view by double middle clicking in here. And to further customize the viewport, you're able to set the grid lines color as well. This one is the default gray grid line. If you want to change the color, you can change in here to see the grid line in the color that you want. It's not pretty important, but that's something to consider. And if you want to go back to the default gray, you simply drag this slider down so that you go to the default. And the next one is grid spacing, and this is based on the unit setup that you have for your scene. And to set up your units, you go to preference, edit, preference, and in tree window, there's a unit in here which you can manipulate, and by the default it's in foot. But if you're going to work in Unreal Engine or softwares that use meter system, you're going to set it to centimeters and meters as well, because it's going to be pretty important, and you're going to assign the unit always, even before starting a project. Now the unit is in foot, and this grid spacing is going to be in foot as well. It's going to have 10-foot spacing between each line in here. And one good practice before starting any project is going to be setting the unit, because for now the height of the tree in units are 43, and this is in foot. But if you export this one into Unreal Engine, it's going to be exported as 43 units, and the units are going to be in Unreal Engine units, which are centimeters, and this tree is going to be exported as 40 centimeter tree, which is not right. So when creating a new project, let's go for blank now. Before doing anything, just go to the units in here, preference, and instead of foot, for example, set it to centimeters. And when you create a basic trunk, you can scale up the tree by selecting it, and in this properties menu you go for size, and for example make it 10 times bigger, and you're going to see the result in centimeters instead of feet. Now the tree is 2.5 meters, and you can of course increase the size to whatever you want. So it's a good practice to, whenever you are starting a project, just go and set the unit to centimeters if you are using centimeters, or if your destination software uses one of these units, just set it and you're good to go. So now one problem occurs. If you go in here, you see that the size of the tree that we were creating, for example, is now in centimeters instead of feet. And as I said, this is the problem that occurs when you convert the unit in the middle of the project. And it's always good to set the units before starting the project so that you do not face such a problem. So to convert this without any problem, you go to Tools and set the unit conversion. And this way, if you for any reason forgot to set the units before starting the project, you hit scene unit conversion, and if you remember, this was in feet. So in here we're going to convert it from feet to centimeters and hit OK. Now we got the units back in centimeters. So to check that if we are right or wrong, let's go to a unit converter, and the tree, I believe, was 42.9, I believe, 42.9 something, and we get 1,300 centimeters, which is right in here. So always before starting the project, just set the units, and if you forgot how to set the units, this is the way to do and to convert. And this indicator always is a good idea to look at to see the scale of the tree. And this is, I believe, 180 centimeters tall, and this is going to be a pretty good indicator of how tall the tree that you're going to be creating is. So let's go to window properties, and this light map view, we are going to be talking about it later on when we are going to create trees for Unreal Engine 4. We're going to be talking about the light maps. But to get an idea, light map is the second UV channel that a speed tree is going to create for you when importing the tree to Unreal Engine or softwares that use static lighting, so that it bakes the lighting information on the second UV channel. We're going to be talking about the light maps later on. And to make this really yours, you can change the background as well. Now it's using the ambient light, which is the default one, but you can set it to a solid color. For example, if you don't want to see any lighting information distracting your view, you're going to use the solid color. Of course, the lighting information is going to be present in the scene. It's not going to be shown as the ground and sky. but instead you're going to set it to a color, for example, to whatever you want. And the next good option is the Spherical Paranormal. Simply select it, and you're going to select a panorama in here. You're going to select it and go to the direction that you have an HDR image and select it, okay? Hit open, and it's going to show a default HDRI for you if you like it, and it's really good for getting a quick render and see a quick result in here. And of course you can make it brighter, make it darker, adding contrast or rotating. The controls are there and you can use them. So let's go for the default ambient lighting. So this is for the viewports, and then there's the toolbar in here, which you can do most of the basic stuff in here, including creating, if you want to even create or add anything into the scene, add any forces or add light, change the resolution, go to different modes and things like that. So let's explore to see what each one does. The first one is the render, and it's going to change what you see in here, and it's going to help you visualize a lot of the information about this model. For example, this is a PBR material in here. You see SpeedTree is going to use the PBR system for rendering, and if you're gonna only see the base color and what it does without any normal or roughness information, you go to render, and in the material mode, for example, hit color. Now you're only seeing the color without any normal or roughness information. It's pretty much only albedo and diffuse color. So the most important render ones are the standard, which is the final result, which is what you are seeing here by default. And then there's this script, which allows you to see the polygons without any PBR information. And this is the amount of polygon. You see it's pretty dense, and for something like a game model, this is not good. And it's a good indicator to see the polygons and the distribution in the tree. And the next one is the AO, which is a pretty much important one. It's going to show the ambient occlusion of the tree. And ambient occlusion is one of the most important factors in rendering a good tree. So this is the ambient occlusion. It's going to show us which parts of the tree are more exposed to the sun. The whiter the shade is, the more exposed to the sun, and the more it goes to the black, the darker it's going to be. And the black is not going to be reached by the sun, and the white parts are going to be reached by the sun basically. And it's going to make these parts darker in rendering so that we get a little bit more shape definition and depth into our trees. And to remove the ambient occlusion information, you go to this tools and clear ambient occlusion. And if you want to add ambient occlusion, you simply go to tools and render ambient occlusion. It's going to take a bit to render the tree. Now you see it has computed the ambient occlusion for us. So let's go to a standard view to see what the ambient occlusion does. And you see the parts that are not exposed to the sun are getting darker, which adds more definition and depth to the tree. So let's clear the ambient occlusion, and this is it. Now the tree looks dull and less interesting. And of course there's a shortcut in here. If you deselect everything in the viewport, there's a compute AO, and the shortcut is the key O in the keyboard. If you want to compute the ambient occlusion, you press O, and it's going to take a bit depending on the strength of your machine, and it's going to compute the ambient occlusion for you. Of course, there's albedo check and subsurface check, which we'll be talking about later on. These are indicators to see if the albedo color is right or not, and subsurface color is right or not. So the most important ones are these. Of course, you can go and visualize the vertex colors if you have any, and see the different PBR textures in your material and visualize them one by one. The next option is show, and it's good for visualizing only some parts of the tree that you want. For example, if you want to hide the leaves to only be able to see the trunk and branch, you come in here and uncheck these leaves in here so that you're able to see the leaves only. And remember that it's not going to remove anything, it's going to temporarily hide it. And the next one is zoom, and pretty much you can select any part of the tree, whether you are selecting from this part or in the viewport. For example, when I select the trunk, I'm able to hit Z and zoom on the part that I have in here. And for example, if I select this part, let me see what that is. It's this part in here. Let me zoom out, and if I hit Z, or if that doesn't work, simply hit zoom and it's going to zoom on it for you. So I believe this is enough for basic stuff, and in the next chapter we're going to dive more into the features of the window tree here. Okay, see you there. Okay, in the previous lesson we talked about the basic UI stuff in SpeedTree. Now let's continue to dive into the remaining ones. This next option is the scene, and it's going to be controlling and manipulating the objects that you have in the scene. And objects are divided into forces, collision, wind, and light. Of course, we're going to discuss in depth and learn a lot of things individually about these, but in this introductory lesson, we're going to be only discussing some basics so that you have a basic idea of what is going on. The first one is responsible for manipulating the forces in the scene, whether manipulating them or adding new forces. And these forces are pretty much important things in a speed tree which you can use. And to get a better idea, let's create a new scene. Let me create a blank scene and add a trunk in here. And I really do not care about the size and the units in here, but to add a force in here, you simply go and, for example, let's add a magnet. It's going to add a magnet force in the scene, and you have the manipulator to move the magnet in here. For example, let's place the magnet up in here, and if you want your tree to be affected by this force that you have here, select your tree, and in the forces you see that the magnet has been added in here, and there's a checkbox in here which you can check. So you check it and it's going to be affected by the magnet. And if you move the magnet, you're able to control the shape of the tree using this magnet. And we're going to talk about these forces in depth later on, but this is to give you a quick idea. And the next option is for manipulating the collision objects. And this collision object is especially useful for games. For example, let me remove this magnet. Suppose that this is a tree and we really do not want the player to run into this tree and make this tree block the way of the player. And for that we simply go and add a collision object, and in this case this is a sphere-like object that we have here. So we create a capsule and the player isn't going to be walking in this area, and it's going to block the way of the player so that the player doesn't run into the tree. And of course you can manipulate the length and the radius and things like that. And it's especially useful for games and interactive programs. And the next option is for wind and creating and manipulating the wind in your scene. Now you see the tree isn't moving at all, and it's a static mesh pretty much. We are able to edit the wind properties, and using this wind wizard, you are able to use from the presets that a speed tree has to create a wind system for your tree. For example, telling that if this static mesh is a bush, if it's a grass, if it's a palm tree, it has some presets to help you out. And as I said, we're going to discuss them later on, but let's enable the wind. Now you see the tree is moving just pretty much naturally. toggle these to oscillate between these min and max value. This is the maximum that it can go. For example, let's set it right here, and now it's going to oscillate between from here and here. Let it just calculate so that you see the strength. And this is for preview purposes to see how the tree is acting in the wind. So let's disable the wind. And the next one is for manipulating the light that you see in the scene. Now we are seeing a daylight scene. Of course, this is where you can edit the lighting manually. For example, the ground, you can change it to whatever you want. Or the better way is to use some of the presets in here. And one wonderful one is the night. Now you see the scene has changed to a nighttime scene to see what PBR materials are doing in different lighting conditions, even before exporting this tree to an application, for example, Unreal or Max or Blender or whatever. You check some of the light presets in here, for example, desert. It's going to give you an idea of how the PBR materials and the tree are looking in different lighting conditions. The next option is the shadows, and the default one is the medium quality. And if you bring it up high, it's going to compute the shadows to ultra quality, or you can disable them completely. You see, now the shadows are gone, and it's for times if you have a weaker machine, or if you want to make the shadows go to ultra quality like this. So let's change the preset to the standard one. And again, in here, you can render the ambient occlusion or clear the ambient occlusion as well. The next one is the resolution, and it's pretty much self-explanatory. You can bring the resolution of the model down depending on the resolution slider that you create for these generators. And we're going to be talking about these later on. But to get an idea, if you set it to medium, just look at this resolution number. And let's go to this mode to be able to see the polygons. Okay, this is the polygon. If you go to medium, you see the polygon count comes down much more. And let's go to low. Now you see the polygon coming down lower even. And if we zoom on here, you're able to see that the polygons have been decreased drastically. And this has its own use cases, which we will talk about later on. And everything you do is going to clear the ambient occlusion data, so it's recommended to turn it back on. Now we are in high resolution, and let's go for ambient occlusion and render. And it's going to make your tree pop up a little bit more, like this, adding a bit of depth on areas which the sun isn't going to reach out. The next one, which is an important one, is cycling between the different modes: the generator mode, the node mode, and the freehand mode. And before that, we need to really discuss what these are. So let's go to our new default scene and hide these. So a speed tree is based on proceduralism, and the heart of the speed tree is in here, in the generation panel. In this generation panel, you're able to add all sorts of things that combine a tree. For example, a trunk, branches, or leaves, and anything basically. And any of these that you add in here is called a generator. For example, this is a trunk generator, and it's going to have a lot of properties to enable you manipulate the tree and the trunk of the tree to your liking. So this is called a generator, these that you add in here. And each generator has been composed of multiple nodes. For example, let's add some branches into here, and let's bring the number up high. You see, now if I select this one, this is a branch generator. And this branch generator has been composed of 25 nodes. And each individual branch in here is called a node. And when you're working in the generation mode, you're only able to select them as a whole. But if you go to node mode, you're able to select them individually and work on them, do any changes that you want, selecting them rotating, and basically do anything that you want to make this. Excuse me, it crashed, but I recovered the scene, and we have the trunk in here. So if you go to node mode, you're able to manipulate them and even deleting them, because the procedurals are going to get you halfway there. And to go and be maximum realistic in creating the tree, you're going to be having to do some manual changes, and those manual changes are going to be delivered in the node mode, and you're able to manipulate the mode by hitting tab to go to different modes. And the next one is freehand, which we will be talking about later on. This has been added in SpeedTree latest versions, and it's good for fine-tuning and last final minute touches. And the best way to create the tree in a SpeedTree is to go with the generators and go procedural to a certain way, and then after that go to node mode and start manipulating the individual nodes and do the final touches in the freehand mode. Of course, this is the introductory course, and later on we're going to discuss what each of these modes do. And next up in the edit section, you're able to add, and this one is equivalent if you right click on the tree and add geometry to select it. This is just like that. You are able to add generators in here. And even you can import your own meshes, your own photogrammetry meshes, or decorative meshes, or custom meshes to the scene and start creating the model. Of course, we are going to be talking about them later on. So, and you can, of course, go and if you select this, it's going to be hierarchical. If you select this and hit add and add branches, it's going to add it to the branches that we were selected. And if we select this one and go to add again and hit branches, it's going to add these branches to the latest layer. And the next one is visibility, which you can of course control using H. And if you select something, for example a generator, and you can hit H to hide it. And this of course works both in generator mode and node mode. For example, if I go to node mode and select each of the branches and hit H, it's going to hide this one only. But if I go to generator mode and select these branches and hit H, it's going to hide the generator for us, not the nodes. And the next grade mode is the focus mode. Let me select this and hit H to bring it back. And by focus mode, you're able to focus only on particular nodes. Let me go this tree. And for example, let's select a node. Let's select a generator. I'm going to select this branch in here and hit the focus mode. Hit F. And it's going to hide anything but the node that I have clicked on in here. And it's going to show the anatomy that creates this. It's going to show the trunk and the big branch and little branch and then the branch that I have selected. And of course there are different modes, which are focus siblings, which is going to hide anything after this node in the generation panel. And there's of course focus ancestors, which is going to show only the necessary things in here. And to clear the focus and go back to the default one, you hit Ctrl and F to reveal all of the tree. And the next one is Gizmo, which are pretty much what you expect from a Gizmo. It's move, rotate, and resize. And by default, the coordinates are in world, but if you want to make them local, you can make them local. For example, if I set this to local, now based on the rotation of the tree, the gizmos have been changed. And the next option is the seasons, which is one of the most amazing features that a SpeedTree has. And if you make the settings right, if you select this season, you're able to go from spring to winter and see your tree in every season. For example, let's go to autumn, and it's going to decolor the trees, decolor the leaves, make some of the leaves fallen, and do all kinds of things that you see in every season. And for example, if you go to winter, it's going to completely remove all of the leaves from the tree and leave just a couple of ones in here. And of course, we're going to make seasons later on. And this is just to give you an idea. But to make the seasons work, there are some preparations that you need to do. For example, just setting up the appropriate material and fixing the generators to do that. Okay, the next option is the AO, which have been covered. By holding down O, you're able to generate the ambient occlusion, and there's collision, which you create collision for leaves, and using down this, you're able to minimize or maximize the toolbar, which enables you to see the text or icons themselves. So we have covered all of these parts, and the remaining part now is the material part in here, which you can of course summon the textures and do all kinds of manipulations to them. For example, you can bring in textures in here and create materials and meshes as well. And you can create cutout meshes and do some UV things in here. So I believe this is enough for the UI and navigation and basic stuff. Now that we have a little bit of understanding of what a speed tree is and how it works, we are able to go deeper, and we will do that in the next sessions. Okay, see you there. So after understanding the UI and different modes and different windows, it's time we talk about the actual modeling paradigm inside a speed tree. Every software has different modeling paradigm for itself. For example, in case of most 3D applications, you create some blocks, do some polygon modeling, add modifiers, and things like that, which you are familiar with the 3D softwares out there, including Blender, Max, Maya, or anything. They have more or less the same paradigm. It's about adding primitives or using polygons to model objects. And a speed tree as well has its own paradigm. And getting ourselves familiar with the paradigm helps us really get the best result possible. You know, trees are different to model. There's a lot of complexity in this tree example that we have in here. You know, if you're going to model this tree inside Blender or Max or anything, it's going to be very hard. Even inside ZBrush, it's going to be very hard. You're going to create the tree, and then you're going to model the leaves and distribute the leaves on the tree, and it's going to take forever to make a tree using manual methods. But a speed tree is here to make that simple for us. You really do not want to polygon model a tree from the ground up. You're going to use some generators to go to the middle and use the nodes and freehand to fine-tune the tree even more. So the paradigm of a speed tree modeling is the mix between the procedural modeling and manual modeling. Procedurals, or in this case the specific name is the generators, are there to make you roughly create the big shape, and by big shape I mean the overall silhouette of the tree, and then there's nodes and freehand which you can use to further manipulate the tree and make it more realistic and look less procedural. You know, a lot of the times when I'm going to explain something like this, I'm going to create a triangle and explain that using this triangle. You see, this triangle has something to stand on. It has a firm base, it has a firm structure, and it stands on the ground pretty well. And this is really solid structure to make it really stand on the ground. And on top of it, it's beauty. It's balance, it's detail, it's whatever you call it. And it's like this in a speed tree. We divide this into three categories. The first one being the structure, the second one being the medium details, and the last one being the fine-tuning details. So I like to call this big, and this part medium, and this part small. And in terms of a speed tree, I like to call this part generators, this part node, and this part freehand. These generators really provide a strong base for us so that it has a strong structure and it's not going to fall apart. Then after ge generating the generators and doing the rough blockout, it's time to manipulate the nodes and take some of that procedurality out of the way. And when we were finished creating the medium shapes using the nodes, it's time about using freehand to really fine-tune and finalize our model. And these different modes are available in here. There's generators which will create the tree procedurally, and then there's nodes which you can use them to further create the tree and make it really more realistic. And then there's freehand which you can use to finalize your model. So the generators are handled using this generation panel and of course the properties panel. Of course, because we have not selected anything, we are not seeing any properties. But as soon as we click on a generator or a node or anything, we are going to see the properties in here. And these properties are what makes the tree stand out really. There are a lot of controls which we can use to make the tree possible. So it's good to know that using the generation panel and properties, we are able to control the procedural look of the tree. And this generation is really hierarchical. Things come after each other. You see, everything that we have in here has been connected to a trunk node. Everything starts from here. And then after that, it comes the roots being attached to it using different generators and different branch levels as well. Everything is hierarchical. And if I attach something to this first level of branches, it's going to only affect this branch. I mean in node level or generation level. And everything I attach to this is going to be attached only to this. For example, if I take this and connect it to the trunk in here, you see it has changed completely because these branches that I have added are being connected to the trunk, not the first level of branches in here. So keeping the hierarchy manageable is one of the most important things when using a speed tree. So let me open a new blank scene and explain things in here. We have this tree, which is the bare bone of everything that we create in here. If we want to create something that is affecting the tree, affecting this scene, we are going to connect it to this. So let's right click on it or add from here. I'm going to add a trunk. And for now, I really do not care about the unit conversion because we are going to only talk about some modeling things. So we added a basic trunk. And for example, if you want to have multiple trunks, you can do that. If you want to make the trunk bigger or smaller, you can do that. You can do basically anything that you want. And we're going to explain these properties later on. But this trunk that we created is called a generator. And it's going to create one or multiple components. In this case, it has created only one component. But if I try to make this more even, you see it has created 3 different trunks, and each one has been called a node. And they are accessible using this menu. And if I select on this, it's going to select this for me. Let me bring it out. I can select different nodes and do whatever I want to do with them. So these are called nodes. And some of them together is called a generator. And a generator is the component that makes it up. In this case, we have 3 different nodes creating a generator. So let me go to generator mode and decrease the number so that we have only this. And now I'm going to create the first level of branches. So I click on here and create a branch. So this is a branch generator in here which we have. And now it's composed of only a single node. And if I want to make it multiple nodes, I select this and add 10. So this is a generator in here, and the components are called the nodes. If we select this branch as a generator, we are able to procedurally control the look of it. But if we go to the node mode, we are able to take each of them individually and select them, rotate them, scale them, and do whatever we want to do with them to further manipulate the tree. But unlike the generator mode, which the values are real in here, for example, we have the size in here, for example, set to 1. If we go to node mode and select any of them, you see the size in here is 0. And if it's 0, it means that we have done nothing to this. And this value is offset to the generator value that we have there. And it's going to control only the things that are going to happen on this particular node. For example, if I enter 2 in here, it's going to multiply the size of that node by 2 for us. So it's good to know that if you see the values in here are all 0, it means that you have done nothing there. And this change is going to remain in the tree itself. And if I select them in the generator mode, I mean selecting them, all of them together, if I come into the size and make the size, for example, 0.5, you see all of them have been reduced, and this one has been reduced as well, but the offset value that we created is there, and it's going to remain. You do something that alters this node. For example, one of the things that alters is the randomization. If you randomize this generator, you see it's going to reset that because now that particular node isn't there. Or if you increase or reduce the number of nodes, it's going to reset that offset value that we created there. So ultimately, this is the way to do that. We use generators to rough out the blockout and then use the node and freehand together to create the medium and small shapes. And the generator and node are responsible to generate and manipulate the procedural data. And this freehand to ultimate artistic controls over the tree creation. And of course, having the hierarchy in mind is an essential thing to consider. And of course, there are 2 modes for this generation panel. If you right click in here and a style orientation, you can make it automatic. It's going to automatically set up for you. And then there's portrait and landscape. This portrait is going to be up and down, and the landscape is going to be from left to right. And automatic is going to decide which one is best depending on the tree that you have. So let's add another level up branch in here. And since the hierarchy is like this, the branches are going to grow on the first level up branch, and then this first level up branch is going to grow on the trunk itself. And we're going to read from left to right or bottom to top. If we go to portrait mode in here, orientation, if we set it to portrait, the good thing to read is from bottom to top. The first level is the trunk, and then these branches grow off of the trunk, and then these branches grow off on these branches. And if I select yet another branch level, it's going to go and be like that. And on this, if I decide to assign leaves in here, these leaf cards are going to grow off only on these branches. On these branches. You see, we have selected here, and these leaf cards are growing on these last level branches in here. And if I select this and bring it in here, let me bring this in here, the leaves, and make them select to these second level branches, and you see they have been connected in here instead of these last ones. So I believe this is enough for this lesson, and in the next lesson we're going to dedicate our time to go and see these different generators and see what each one do and what to expect from each generator, because it's good to know the tools and the tool set and the mindset when we are going to create a tree. Okay, see you there.